The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Gastroenterology Center buzzed overhead as I organized the endoscopy equipment for the day's procedures. The morning shift had just begun, and I already could hear Dr. Richard Holbrook's voice echoing down the hallway, sharp and irritated as usual.
In this hospital, those with medical licenses are absolute. Everyone else might as well be trash.
Dr. Holbrook's words cut through the air like a scalpel. I looked up from the scope I was cleaning, my jaw tightening. Mrs. Rodriguez, one of our regular patients, had shown some concerning symptoms during her last visit, and I needed to bring this to his attention. But the patient's condition, I began, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. Dr. Holbrook spun around, his face flushing red with anger.
What? You dare talk back to me, a doctor, when you don't even have a medical license? Just shut up and do what I say. Move, you're in my way.
The force of his shoulder against mine sent me stumbling backward. The other nurses and technicians in the room quickly averted their eyes. Familiar dance we all learned to perform whenever Dr. Holbrook went on one of his tirades. This wasn't the first time Dr. Holbrook had demonstrated his disdain for those he considered beneath him. In his mind, the hierarchy was clear. Those with medical licenses stood at the top, while nurses, technicians, and support staff were mere stepping stones beneath his feet. I wanted to argue, to point out that in front of a patient, we should all be equals working towards the same goal, the patient's well-being. But I bit my lip instead, tasting the bitter copper of frustration. There was no use in creating more tension, not when we had a full day of procedures ahead of us. The memory of my mother's face flashed before my eyes, pale and drawn as she lay in her hospital bed 5 years ago. I was still in high school then, watching helplessly as colorectal cancer slowly took her away from me. She had been a single parent, juggling multiple jobs to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads. There had never been a time for regular checkups, no spare moments for preventive care. By the time they found the cancer, it had already spread too far.
If only we had caught this earlier,
the doctor had said, his words haunting me even now.
Things might have been different.
Those words changed the course of my life. I had already been accepted to medical school when my mother fell ill, but her death gave me a new purpose. I wouldn't just be a doctor. I would be the kind of doctor who listened, who cared, who saw patients as people rather than just cases to be solved. After graduating at the top of my class and completing my residency in general surgery, I made a decision that shocked my colleagues. I chose to become an endoscopy technician. Many called it a waste of my talents, but I knew that early detection could save lives. If I could help catch even one case early enough to prevent another child from losing their parent, it would be worth it. But now, watching Dr. Holbrook storm down the hallway, I wonder if I had made the right choice. The hospital politics and hierarchy sometimes felt suffocating, especially under the thumb of someone like him. My thoughts were interrupted by the sudden blare of emergency alarms. Through the glass walls of the ICU, I could see nurses rushing towards room 412, Mr. Thompson's room. The 45-year-old father of 3 had been admitted yesterday with severe abdominal pain, and his condition had been deteriorating rapidly.
Dr. Holbrook, we need emergency surgery right now, doctor!
Sarah, one of our most experienced nurses, called out. I hurried towards the commotion, arriving just in time to see Dr. Holbrook frozen in the doorway. His face had drained of all color, and his breathing came in short, rapid gasps. The confident facade had cracked, revealing something I never expected to see. Pure unbridled fear.
I can't.
He stammered, his hands shaking as he gripped the doorframe.
There's no way I can do this kind of surgery.
The monitor beeped ominously, displaying Mr. Thompson's plummeting vital signs. The patient's abdomen was distended, suggesting a possible bowel perforation. Without immediate intervention, a septic shock would be inevitable.
But doctor, if we don't act now, the patient will...
Sarah's voice trailed off, her eyes darting between Dr. Holbrook and the rapidly declining patient. Time seemed to slow down as I processed the situation. The nearest qualified surgeon was at least 30 minutes away. Mr. Thompson didn't have that long. I made my decision. I'll do it, I announced, my voice carrying across the tense silence of the room. All eyes turned to me, a mixture of confusion and disbelief on their faces.
What? But what are you talking about?
Dr. Holbrook managed to sputter.
You don't have a medical license. There's no way you can do this.
I met his gaze steadily. Don't worry about that. I do have one.
What?
Sarah's eyes widened with recognition.
Dr. Holbrook?
She interjected.
Mr. Parker used to be a brilliant surgeon before becoming an endoscopy technician. I worked with him at Metropolitan General. He'll be fine.
The weight of everyone's stares pressed against me as I quickly left to change the surgical scrubs. In the changing room, I took a deep breath, letting the familiar routine center me. It had been 2 years since I last performed surgery, but some things you never forget, like riding a bicycle or saving lives. Back in the operating room, the team had already prepared everything. The fluorescent lights felt different from this angle, harder somehow, more demanding. I looked down at Mr. Thompson's unconscious form and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto my shoulders. I will now begin the emergency procedure, I announced, extending my hand. Scalpel. The cool metal against my palm sent a shiver of nervous energy through my body. But as I made the first incision, muscle memory took over. The familiar dance of surgery came back to me. The careful dissection, the methodical exploration, the precise sutures. Time resolved into a series of focused moments. Cut, clamp, suture. Each movement deliberate, each decision calculated. The team worked in perfect synchronization, anticipating needs before they arose. This was what I had missed. Not the prestige or the title, but the sense of purpose. Of being exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. 2 hours later, I stepped back from the table, removing my bloody gloves. The surgery had been successful. We had found and repaired the perforation just in time, before sepsis could take hold. Mr. Thompson would live to see his children grow up. The relief in the room was palpable. Nurses and technicians exchanged tired smiles, the sheer triumph of a life saved binding us together. Even Dr. Holbrook, who had remained in the observation room throughout the procedure, looked shaken but grateful. As I was updating Mr. Thompson's chart later that evening, Dr. Holbrook approached me in the empty hallway. The usual arrogance was gone from his bearing, replaced by something that looked almost like shame.
I owe you an explanation,
He said quietly, leaning against the wall beside me.
and an apology.
I looked up from my paperwork, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice.
My father was a surgeon.
He continued, his eyes fixed on some distant point.
He was brilliant, dedicated, respected. Everything I wanted to be. But he also believed that technical skill was everything, that compassion was a weakness, that working with others was beneath him.
He paused, running a hand through his graying hair.
He died alone in his office, having a heart attack. His nurses had tried to tell him something was wrong, but he wouldn't listen to them. He thought he knew better, right until the end.
The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken understanding.
And I became exactly like him, didn't I?
Dr. Holbrook's laugh was bitter.
Today, when I froze, it wasn't just fear of the procedure. It was seeing myself clearly for the first time, seeing what I become.
I closed the chart, choosing my words carefully. It's never too late to change, Dr. Holbrook. He nodded slowly.
Call me Richard, and thank you. Not just for saving Thompson, but for showing me what real strength looks like.
The next 2 weeks brought changes I never expected to see. Mr. Thompson recovered quickly, his positive attitude and determination speeding his healing. The day of his discharge, his 3 young children presented the hospital staff with hand-drawn thank you cards. Their crayon artwork now proudly displayed in the break room. But the most remarkable transformation was in Dr. Holbrook himself. The morning after Mr. Thompson's surgery, he gathered the entire staff for a meeting.
Everyone?
He began, his voice softer than I ever heard it.
Today's patient was very nervous about their first surgery. Though our capabilities may be limited, let's do everything we can to accommodate their needs and provide the best possible care.
The nurses exchanged shocked glances as he continued.
I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I owe you all an apology. My behavior has been inexcusable. Each of you brings valuable skills and perspectives to this team, and I've been a fool not to see that.
The change wasn't just in his words. Over the following days, he began actively engaging with the staff at all levels, learning names, asking for input, sharing jokes during coffee breaks. The tense atmosphere that he had permeated to the hospital for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of genuine teamwork. One morning, I found him in the break room, actually making coffee for the night shift nurses before they headed home. The sight was so unexpected that I had to do a double take.
Sean,
He called out, using my first name, another new development.
I've been meaning to ask, would you consider taking on some surgical cases again? Not full-time,
He added quickly, seeing my hesitation.
but we could use your skills. I think the residents could learn a lot from your approach.
I thought about my mother, about the path that had led me here. I'll consider it, I replied, but only if I can continue with the endoscopy program. Early detection saves lives. I've seen it firsthand. He nodded, understanding in his eyes.
Of course. You know, your mother would be proud of you.
The words caught me off guard. I didn't realize he knew about my mother, but of course he must have read my file when I was hired. Thank you, I managed, feeling a sudden tightness in my throat. As I watched him distribute the coffee cups to the departing nurses, each one receiving a genuine thank you for their service, I reflected on how far we'd all come. Dr. Holbrook had been right about one thing. A hospital couldn't run on compassion alone. It needed skill, knowledge, and precision, but it also needed humanity, teamwork, and mutual respect. The incident of Mr. Thompson had helped me reaffirm that my beliefs weren't wrong. As healthcare providers, we walk a delicate line between technical expertise and human connection. The body and mind are inextricably linked, and patients entrust themselves most readily to those who show them care when they're anxious or suffering. Precisely because we deal with life and death daily, I've come to understand that being trusted and respected by colleagues allows us to unite in facing these challenges to life. Each person in our hospital, from the surgeons to the cleaning staff, plays a vital role in the intricate dance of healing. Moving forward, I hope to continue working alongside my irreplaceable teammates to support as many patients as possible. Together, we're not just treating illnesses, we're helping people heal, body and soul, one patient at a time. A few weeks after Mr. Thompson's case, I was reviewing patient files when Sarah knocked on my office door. Her expression was unusually serious.
Sean, we have a situation, she said, closing the door behind her. Remember Lisa Chen?
I nodded. Lisa was a 16-year-old who had been coming in for recurring stomach problems. We'd done several routine examinations, but nothing conclusive had been found.
Her mother just called. Lisa collapsed at school today, Sarah continued. They're bringing her in now.
Something about Lisa's case had been nagging at me for weeks. Her symptoms didn't quite fit the usual patterns, and there was something in her eyes during our conversations, a shadow that spoke of more than just physical pain. When Lisa arrived, pale and weak on the gurney, I noticed fresh bruises on her arms. Her mother, Mrs. Chen, hovered nearby, her worried eyes never leaving her daughter's face.
Dr. Holbrook is with another patient, Sarah informed me. He asked if you could take the lead on this one.
I nodded, already pulling up Lisa's previous test results on the computer. As I reviewed her file, a pattern began to emerge, one that I had seen before during my residency. Lisa? I said gently, pulling up a chair beside her bed. I need to ask you something important. Have you been making yourself sick after meals? The room went still. Mrs. Chen's hands flew to her mouth, but Lisa just looked down in her hands, tears welling in her eyes.
How did you know?
She whispered. The pattern of your symptoms, the timing of your visits, the electrolyte imbalances in your blood work. They all point to bulimia, I explained. But more than that, I noticed how you flinch when people mention food, how you avoid eating during your appointments. Mrs. Chen began to cry quietly.
But why, Lisa? Why didn't you tell me?
Lisa's story came out in broken pieces. The pressure to be perfect, the bullying at school, the feeling of being out of control. As she spoke, I saw Dr. Holbrook appear in the doorway, listening silently. We're going to help you, Lisa, I promised. Not just with the physical symptoms, but with everything else too. We have an excellent eating disorder program here, and Dr. Sarah Thompson, no relation to our recent Mr. Thompson, is one of the best psychiatrists I know. Over the next few months, I watched Lisa's progress with pride. The road wasn't easy, but with proper support and treatment, she began to heal, both physically and emotionally. Her case reminded me why I had chosen this path in medicine. Sometimes, the most important thing we can do is simply pay attention and listen. The experience also sparked something unexpected, a hospital-wide initiative to better integrate mental and physical health care. Dr. Holbrook, to everyone's surprise, became one of its strongest advocates.
You know,
He said to me one day as we watched Lisa leave after a follow-up appointment, looking healthier than we'd ever seen her.
I used to think being a good doctor was all about knowing the right procedures, making the right diagnosis. But cases like Lisa's, they teach you that healing is about seeing the whole person.
I smiled, remembering my mother. That's what I learned from Mom's battle with cancer. Doctors who treated her were technically competent, but they never really saw her, a single mother working 3 jobs, too busy taking care of everyone else to take care of herself.
Is that why you chose to become an endoscopy technician after being a surgeon?
He asked.
To have more time with patients?
Partly, I admitted, but also because I realized that sometimes the most important moments in medicine happen before the dramatic surgeries. They happen in the quiet conversations, the routine screenings, the moments when we catch something early enough to make a difference. Our conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the ER. A bus had overturned on the highway, and casualties were arriving. As we hurried toward the emergency department, I noticed something different in the way the staff moved. Not the previous chaos of everyone working independently, but a coordinated dance of professionals who trusted and respected each other. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Holbrook and I worked side by side, along with the rest of the team, treating injuries that ranged from minor cuts to life-threatening trauma. At one point, I found myself performing emergency surgery again, but this time, Dr. Holbrook was there beside me, our skills complementing each other perfectly. During a brief break, as we gulped down coffee in the staff room, Sarah approached us with a strange expression on her face.
You need to see this,
she said, holding up her phone. On the screen was a social media post going viral. A photo taken by one of the bus crash survivors, showing our team in action. The caption read, "Angels and scrubs at St. Mary's. They don't just save lives, they restore faith in humanity." The photo had thousands of shares, and the comment section was filled with stories from former patients, each one talking about the exceptional care they received at our hospital. Many mentioned specific staff members by name: nurses, technicians, doctors, even the cleaning staff who would offer kind words during difficult times. Dr. Holbrook read through the comments, his expression softening.
You know what's remarkable about this?
He said finally.
None of these people are talking about our technical skills or medical expertise. They're talking about how we made them feel cared for, how we listened, how we treated them like people instead of just patients.
That's what makes this place special, I agreed. It's not just about the procedures we perform or the lives we save. It's about the way we do it, with compassion, respect, and teamwork. As if to illustrate my point, just then the door opened and in walked Mr. Thompson, carrying several large boxes of pizza.
Thought you all might be hungry.
He grinned.
My kids insisted on bringing something for their heroes.
The sight of the entire emergency department, doctors, nurses, technicians, and support staff, sharing pizza and trading stories from the day's events, would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. But here we were, barriers broken down, hierarchies forgotten, united in our commitment to helping others. Later that night, as I was finally preparing to head home, I found a note in my locker. It was from Dr. Holbrook.
Sean, today reminded me of something my father never understood. That true excellence in medicine isn't about individual brilliance. It's about bringing out the best in each other. Thank you for teaching me that lesson. Richard.
As I drove home under the stars, I thought about how far we'd all come. The hospital transformed from a place of rigid hierarchies and lonely struggles to a community of healers working together. Dr. Holbrook had evolved from a proud, isolated figure to a respected leader who valued every member of his team. And I had found my place, not just as a former surgeon or current technician, but as someone who could bridge different worlds and help others do the same. Next morning, as I prepared for another day at work, I remembered something my mother used to say. Life isn't about the title you hold or the recognition you receive. It's about the difference you make in other people's lives. Looking around at my colleagues, my friends, I knew she was right. Every day, in ways both big and small, we were making that difference. And that, more than any medical degree or professional achievement, was something to be proud of. The following month brought changes I never expected to see at St. Mary's. The hospital board, impressed by our improved patient outcomes and satisfaction rates, approved funding for a new integrated care initiative. The program would combine preventive screenings, mental health services, and community outreach. Everything I had dreamed of implementing since my mother's passing. Dr. Holbrook asked me to co-lead the initiative with him.
Your perspective is invaluable,
He said during the planning meeting.
You understand both the technical and human sides of medicine in a way few others do.
As we worked together to develop the program, I found myself sharing more about my mother's story. One evening, after a particularly long planning session, I showed him the last photo I had of her, smiling despite her illness, her arms around my shoulders at my medical school graduation. She made it to my graduation, I explained, my voice thick with emotion. But she was already so sick by then. She held on just long enough to see me become a doctor. 2 weeks later, Dr. Holbrook studied the photo carefully.
She looks proud,
He said softly.
and she should be. You become the kind of doctor she would have needed, one who sees the whole picture.
Our first major initiative was a free screening program for underdeserved communities. We set up mobile clinics in the neighborhoods where people like my mother often couldn't afford to take time off work for regular checkups. The entire staff volunteered their time, from the newest interns to the most experienced surgeons. During one of these outreach events, we met Maria Gonzalez, a cleaning lady working 3 jobs to support her family, just like my mother had. She hadn't had a checkup in years, and the preliminary screening revealed concerning symptoms. I can't afford to be sick, she protested when we suggested further tests. My children! Let us help you, I said, remembering my mother's similar words. We have programs in place. Your children need you healthy. Dr. Holbrook stepped forward.
Mrs. Gonzalez, I promise you we'll figure this out together. Your health is our priority.
We caught her cancer early enough to treat it successfully. When she rang the remission bell 6 months later, surrounded by her crying children and grateful family, I felt my mother's presence strongly. This is why we did what we did. The success stories began to multiply. Lisa Chen, now recovered and thriving, started a support group for teenagers struggling with eating disorders. Mr. Thompson volunteered at our community health fairs, sharing his story and encouraging others to seek help early. Even our most hardened staff members found themselves transformed by the new culture of compassion and collaboration. One day, as I was leaving work, I found an elderly gentleman waiting near my car. It took me a moment to recognize him. Dr. James Holbrook, Richard's father.
My son told me I needed to meet you.
He said without preamble.
He says you're the one who taught him what I never could. The true strength lies in admitting our vulnerabilities and working together.
We talked for over an hour in the parking lot. He shared stories of his own journey in medicine, the pressure he faced, the mistakes he made.
I taught Richard that emotion was weakness,
He admitted.
I see now how wrong I was.
The following week, both Holbergs joined our team for another community screening event. Watching father and son work side by side, their shared expertise now tempered with compassion, I felt a sense of completion. Change was possible, at any age, if we were willing to learn and grow. Our hospital continued to evolve. We implemented regular team-building exercises, cross-training programs, and mentorship opportunities. The hierarchy that had once divided us became more fluid, with everyone's contributions valued and respected. 1 year after Mr. Thompson's emergency surgery, we held a celebration, not just for him, but for everything we had achieved together. The hospital cafeteria was transformed for the evening, filled with staff members, former patients, and their families.
I have something to confess,
Dr. Holberg said during his speech.
A year ago, I thought I knew everything about being a good doctor. I was wrong. What I've learned since then, from Sean, from our incredible staff, from our brave patients, is that medicine isn't just about procedures and protocols. It's about people. It's about community. About walking alongside each other through the hardest moments of life.
As I looked around the room, I saw the truth of his words reflected in every face. There was Lisa Chen, now mentoring younger patients. Maria Gonzalez, surrounded by her healthy, happy family. Mr. Thompson's children, playing with other patients' kids. Sarah, discussing a new patient care initiative with the hospital board members. And I thought about my mother. How proud she would have been to see what we had built here. Not just a hospital, but a true community of healing. Her death had set me on this path, but it was the lives we touched every day that kept me walking it.
You know what the best part is?
Dr. Holberg said to me later that evening.
We're just getting started.
He was right. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities to learn and grow, new chances to make a difference. We have proven that change was possible, that a single act of courage could ripple outward, transforming not just individuals, but entire communities. As I prepared for another day at St. Mary's, I think about all the lives that intersect within these walls. The scared teenager finding her voice, the overwhelmed single parent discovering they're not alone, the veteran surgeon learning to lead with his heart as well as his hands. Each of us has a story, and each story matters. Moving forward, I know there will be more challenges to face, more lives to touch, more lessons to learn. But I'm no longer walking this path alone. Together with my irreplaceable teammates, we'll continue to build something extraordinary. A place where healing happens, not just through medical procedures, but through understanding, respect, and genuine human connection. Because in the end, that's what medicine is truly about. Not just treating illnesses, but caring for people. Not just saving lives, but making those lives worth living. And in that mission, every one of us, from the newest volunteer to the most experienced surgeon, has an essential part to play.